Well, welcome to this month's edition of our Opening Heaven's Door training course. And what I would love to do this month is talk a bit about how we minister to those that actually we feel could take quite a lot of our time and our energy. And to help us in this, it's my great delight to welcome Carolyn Bramhall from Heart for Truth.
That's right.
And Carolyn has had an amazing story, really, of how she has really found and embraced the fullness of life. And you can read all about that in her book.
Am I a Good Girl Yet?
And we'll put details of that on the very end. But the particular reason I want to talk to Carolyn on this occasion is because you've set up something that I feel is a wonderful resource. And you call them truth teams. Now, can you just briefly, summarise what you mean by a truth team, and then we'll talk about it in a bit more detail.
Okay. Well, if I can go backwards a little bit and say the need for a truth team is because churches are overwhelmed, it seems to me, with people who are emerging now with really complex and deep needs. And I think because my passion is to see churches equipped with the tools to love each other in a way that is healing. And yet what happens is that people come along to church with their very complex, very long-term needs and are getting themselves overwhelmed. And I really feel it's important that the church today becomes equipped so that we don't run around like headless chickens when somebody comes and starts sharing something about their past that is really quite nasty, and then we don't know what to do. So right from the start, we need to feel that we've got a handle on some structure that we can create that helps these folks. So that's why Truth Teams has come about. And I don't know whether we want to stick with the label of Truth Teams. I've called it that because I want to call it something. It's micro church.
Okay.
But the concept is that what happens when somebody comes into church and they're really needy? Well, immediately people come from the congregation out to them in a sense. And we say, I want to do you some good. I want to help you. And maybe one or two others will say, yes, the poor things, they need extra prayer, they need some material help, some financial help maybe some life skills, I don't know, all sorts of things they need. And we'll have one or maybe two people who want to help them. But after a while, that one or two people become very, very tired. And for people with long-term emotional needs, their need for the kind of security and belonging is intense.
And if they find themselves getting overwhelmed by the help they're giving, it's going to put them off offering to help somebody else the next time as well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I hear from churches all the time from people who are exhausted.
Yes.
And when I say I'll help you, they'll say, we've done everything we can. I'm exhausted. They've gone to this person and that person and that person. And we don't know what else to do. And he or she has left a trail behind of people who are broken, who now have kind of got bitten and they don't want to help other people, which is so sad because these folks are people who are compassionate and loving and kind. They want to love, they want to give, but often their families are saying, you're not going to do that again.
So what then is a truth team?
A truth team is a team of folk who love Jesus, who love that person who's needy. Maybe they don't know them very well. If they don't, they are prepared to get to know them well. But instead of that person being, if you can imagine a circle of people and that person being in the middle, because they're the ones that need the help. A truth team is not a circle of people around them, but we take that person in the middle out from the middle of the circle and we say, why don't you join a circle of people who love each other,
Okay.
who are friends, and you can be our friend.
Mhm.
And we recognise that you have got pretty desperate needs at the moment. Now, we have needs too, not like yours, but we also have needs. One day, ours might be desperate, but at the moment, yours are the ones we want to understand.
Okay.
And so, as you are part of our circle of friendship, we will form a structure of help where you can be helped in the long term.
When you talk about a circle of friendship or a team, how many are you talking about? Or is there not a fixed number?
Well, there isn't a fixed number, but I'm always asked this, and I would start 6 to 8 is a good number.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about the way Jesus worked. Now, Jesus had 12 disciples, so I wouldn't want to go beyond 12.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, psychologically, after 12, it gets a bit of a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus also had 3 very close friends, Peter, James, and John. And psychologists tend to say that you cannot have an intense, deep soul relationship with more than 2 or 3 people at a time.
Mm-hmm.
That we're not wired to do that.
Okay.
So I would say somebody who has long-term needs, they need a couple of folks who, in the circle picture, they are holding hands with.
Okay.
But the other half a dozen people are also holding hands with each other. And everybody in that circle has a special relationship with that hurting person.
Special relationship.
Well, everyone is different. We're not all called to be counsellors. So for goodness sake, we don't want a truth team full of 6 or 8 counsellors. We couldn't survive that.
Mm-hmm.
1 is quite enough.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want everybody all over you every time we see you wanting to pray with you,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't need that either. And God is doing his work whether or not we're praying every minute of the day.
Mm-hmm.
We do need people who love us in different ways, and so there'll be somebody in the circle who just wants to be a friend, a pal, a buddy. They'll go and do fun things. They're encouraging. They'll take the dog for a walk, or go and have a girls' night out, or go to the pictures, or whatever they do together. Somebody else will pray with them maybe after church every Sunday, or whatever it is. Somebody else will counsel them once a week, perhaps. Somebody else, they will be accountable to them. So maybe once a month has a leadership role, and they will want to know what's going on in your life. And have you been able to take that step forwards? So there is an accountability there.
So, who chooses the truth team or the circle of friends for this person?
That's a good question, and it's a very important one, because the choice ultimately has to be the person whose circle it is,
Yes.
whose team it is. We might say, well, that person would be great, and that person would end up choosing all the good pastoral people in church and using them up.
Yes.
And they wouldn't be around for other people. It's important that they choose people that they trust. And it doesn't mean if it's Uncle Tom down the road who loves Jesus and has a real soft spot for her, but doesn't have any obvious gifting. He might be just the person that is the right one. Maybe she gives to him, but he can come on board. There might be younger people or older people, but there have to be people that she can learn to trust, even if she doesn't trust them completely now. There have to be people who walk with the Lord and who love her. So she would be perhaps talking to her church leader or the pastoral person that's come forward to create this team, and they talk together. They might talk at length and pray together. Lord, who do you want in this little team? And almost always, it's the right people in the end. What I would do is, when I'm invited to be part of that, is I'll go along and I'll say to folks, you're invited here just to taste and see whether it's right for you. And we'll just think about what your roles might be. And but the important thing is people only do what they're equipped to do. So if you're a great fun-loving person and you don't quite understand the depths of people's despair, then your role is not to deal with the memories, but your role is to take them out for coffee afterwards.
Which is very releasing, because you haven't got to do more than you feel able to do. I just take their dog for a walk once.
Yes, let's just go and have a good time.
Yes.
We'll put our wellies on and go for a walk in the woods and get muddy. That's great. And it's very important for everybody, whether they're in some kind of deep recovery situation or not, to learn how to play and laugh and be a person outside of the intensity of recovery.
I was just, as you're talking, thinking about this, that is it possible, do you think, that you could have a truth team around you and yet at the same time be part of somebody else's truth team, helping them do fun things? Or would that be blurring boundaries?
In my experience, that's never happened. Somebody has tried to do that.
Yeah.
I would say all the while that the truth team is in operation in a very structured way, their role in that time would be to make progress in their own lives.
Okay.
Although there are no rules about this, but I think if we're going to the trouble of working out a truth team for you, then you have work to do.
Yes.
And I say to Phil, there's work for you to do here.
Yes.
And you see, what some people would do is say, yeah, but she's got more needs than me, and it's a kind of easy get out. Yeah, well, I couldn't work on my own stuff because I've got to look after her.
Is there somebody, in a sense, in charge of the truth team for the person, or in a sense, are they in charge of the process themselves? Because they may not be able to take that responsibility. Yes,
I would say, well, the roles that I've kind of outlined very roughly come from the list in Romans 12. There's a leader and an encourager and a contributor. There are various, and I've taken it from Romans 12. But the leader there doesn't have to be a church leader, but there does need to be a leader.
Yes.
Somebody who sees themselves as encompassing everyone, can make sure nobody is burning out, and that people are sticking to their roles, and that the wounded person is not taking advantage of people. Now, if everyone's doing it properly, taking advantage or manipulation can't happen, because in a truth team, although things are confidential inside of that team, there is permission to share openly with one another. Now, we don't have to share everything because it isn't always necessary, but we have to really be able to share what is necessary for people to function well in their role. So, for example, if somebody had a bit of a meltdown at 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening and needed some phone support and maybe even needed to go and see somebody for some prayer that night, the person who is going to have coffee with her on a Friday morning will need to know what's happened and have a good, honest assessment of what has happened, so that the wounded person doesn't cancel because you think, I don't want to load it onto her, or she says, I'm fine, or she says, well, they tried to help and it was all a load of rubbish and I'm not going to talk to them anymore. There needs to be that honesty between everybody so that we know what's going on and we know how best to assess a situation.
In that example you just used, you talked about perhaps somebody who has coffee on a Friday, somebody who chats on a Thursday night. Is it actually like that? That you have kind of an allotted time that's your time when you really care for that person, and then you almost hand them over to somebody else for another day of the week? Or
it does start off like that, with those very clear boundaries in place.
Which again is very releasing, because I'm not in this for the rest of my life every day of the week.
Yeah, and it, for example, we had a lady with a truth team in our church some years ago, and she kept on ringing me before the truth team started. She rang 6-7 times a day and needed to talk to me about her health, about all sorts of things, have a good old grumble. I started the truth team because actually she needed containing in church, and her needs everybody in the church knew about, and it wasn't helping her. And so we started a truth team, and what I said to her about her ringing me, I said was that she can ring me for, and we'd chat on the phone for 5 minutes every weekday evening. So she could ring Monday to Friday between 6 and 7, whenever she's ready, she could ring. I would be there. That would be her time. So for 5 or 10 minutes, we'd catch up what's been going on that day. And that was her time. And if she rang during the day, and she did, I would say, actually, what's the time? It's 11 o'clock in the morning. Sorry, this isn't 5 o'clock, is it? Or 6 o'clock. Why don't you ring at 6 o'clock? And then I'm yours. And though it was hard to say that, I was like saying, go away. But that was the time I was ready for her. She had my full attention. That was her time. And once she'd rung, I didn't let anything else get in the way. That was hers. And she learnt to trust me. She learnt what I said I would give, I gave. What I said I wouldn't give, I didn't give. And she learnt her own boundaries, that she could say no to some things, and she meant no, and she was allowed to stick with that.
So again, I just come back to it's releasing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't want to be at all negative in this, but what could go wrong? like do the teams sometimes not work?
Yeah.
What should we be looking out for before we start off on this venture?
Yeah, teams sometimes have a lot of wobblies, and that's fine. Ultimately, starting from the worst case scenario, I've had only 2 teams that I can think of that after a year, they've disbanded feeling that they haven't achieved very much. Now, they will have achieved quite a lot.
Well, they didn't see much progress.
If you've been loving somebody for a year, they will have grown. The givers would have grown.
Yes.
And the person who's been loved has got all that love stored up somewhere in their minds.
Yes.
They just had another agenda. They weren't ready to move on, and maybe they'd come back another time. So, but the most common difficulties is people not sticking with what they have said they would do. Either just not doing it at all, or somebody saying, oh, well, I'll just do this, and I'll just do that a bit more. And then other people whose job that is, if they said, I'll do Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, then the Thursday and Friday people were thinking, oh, well, I'm not needed then. And the whole thing...
As long as everyone knows their place and stays with it.
It's really important, and it's a real discipline that is good for us to practice. That this is the role, this is the ministry God has given to me. It's nobody else's, it's mine. So I can't try and do somebody else's ministry or role or job, but I have got to be faithful for the equipment that God has given me to do that.
So how long can these truth teams go on for, in your experience?
Well, we've had truth teams that have lasted 2 or 3 months, and then people are over the hump of the difficulties in their lives, and they've made really strong relationships in those 3 months. And they've got strong friendships that have lasted for a long time after that. Yeah. And it's like, well, you don't need that structure anymore. You know you've got over that difficult time. It relaxes, and they just come on to be just good members of the church and have grown in it. Others need that structured support, perhaps for their families as well, over 2 or 3 years. But you can do it over 2 or 3 years.
Because it's not one person doing it for 2 years, but it sometimes is in some churches, isn't
it? It is in a lot of churches.
Yes.
And so somebody can come out of the truth team because they've moved house, or their circumstances have changed, or they've got a death in the family and they've got to be somewhere else. they can move out and the whole thing doesn't fall flat. Somebody else might come in and take their role.
So there can be a fluidity about it.
There's lots of fluidity. As long as, that there has to be sensitivity and perhaps the process of saying to somebody, this is what we are, this is what we do, how do you feel about joining us? Yeah.
And what about naturally ending it? I mean, who decides? Or perhaps in one way it doesn't end because you've actually built a strong friendship that just carries on in a sense. Or is there a kind of an ending to the formal structured bit?
Well, everyone's different. We've had one situation where somebody rang who had a truth team, and she said, I think she'd had it about 9 months or something, and it had done so well. She said, you know what, I feel great. I don't feel I need that structure. They're my friends, but I don't need to call it a truth team anymore. Is it okay to stop? Absolutely. If you've got those friends, they're not going anywhere. And so it kind of relaxed, the structure relaxed, and everyone felt, we'll just carry on being friends, but we don't need to keep the structure. Others just naturally, as you say, you just look back and they think, have we got a truth team? I guess we still have. But, we're still all there, but we're not thinking about that being a support team. Sometimes they have a time when we say, okay, from now on, we're not that kind of a team. And so it really is. But the lady who I mentioned earlier, who said, I don't need this, can we stop it? She emailed everyone and said, thanks so much, it's been great. You don't need to feel that you're part of a team now. And I don't know that it changed very much, to be honest. But it seems to work.
It sounds fantastic. Karen, how can people find out more about this? Your website?
Yeah, the website, www.heartfortruth, with an FOR, not a number 4, .org.
Right.
They can email the office at office@heartfortruth.org. And I can give you a phone number they can ring. Would you?
We'll put that'd be along the bottom. Yeah, but
okay.
say it now if you want to.
07922 083 584.
I'm impressed. Whenever I'm asked for a phone number, I go completely blank. But Karen, it's fantastic. And thank you so much for your time in doing this.
Absolutely my pleasure. And I do need to say, well, thank you for what you're doing. But over all of this, the Spirit of God really does work through us, because that's what he chooses, because he loves his church.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.